Hi, everybody. Once again, we want to welcome you. We got our team here. We got Adeline, Deborah, Cynthia, Angela, and of course, Dr. Posa and I here to take you through AP World. We have done units 1 through 8 in 2 nights. We're going to do unit 9 tonight. And after that, we're going to go and dive into the DBQ. You need to have your fingers ready because unlike Kahoots or watching other people just talk on the screen, you're going to be in the live chat. We're going to have you writing thesis statements tonight, you writing contextualizations tonight. We're actually going to be your teachers for tonight. So I'm going to pass it over to Amy, and she's going to dive deep into unit 9, which some of you may never even gotten to. All right, good luck tonight, Amy.
Okay, well, tonight we're going to be talking about Unit 9, and then you guys are going to have an opportunity to do a lot more tonight with participating in the chat, throwing out some thesis statements, practicing writing. So we're really looking forward to seeing what you guys are able to do. But we have one more unit to go. You guys made it through 6 hours, Unit 1 through Unit 8. And now we are going to talk about Unit 9, which is the last unit, which is globalization. Unit 9 is interesting because, like Unit 1, it is only 8 to 10% of the exam, but it's a lot of different stuff crammed together. So we will try to go through, you have in your packet, Unit 9, the follow along. I think there's only 13 questions. So we'll go through and I'll just give you a couple examples of each of the different learning objectives for Unit 9. Once again, we are here, 5able Crams, doing Unit 9 and the DBQ. Remember to follow @Think5able on social. And so here is your team. We are here with you every night for 3 hours with the goal of getting you prepared for the AP World History exam, and we're happy to be here. So how to make the most of a cram finale. Make sure you are taking notes, but don't worry about writing everything down. I know a lot of you are sharing notes. There will be a key at the end of this. So if there is like a question that you missed or you want to check your notes against the key, you'll have an opportunity to do that. So I will be sharing a key to the handout. So don't worry if you missed something. So there is a button at the bottom for all the slides, review packets, and replays. This is all available for you at CramHub. Feel free in the group chat to share tips, tricks, and to participate when we ask questions. Try to stay on topic. We are trying to get ready for the AP World History exam here. So although I'm sure that it's great that you guys give shout outs and make comments about all sorts of random things, that can be entertaining. But at the same time, we need to stay focused on getting prepared for the exam. And there is a Q&A tab. So if you want to pull something out of the chat and go to the Q&A tab, if you have a specific question that you want to lengthen your response to, feel free to do that. We will have a section called Q&A in which we'll directly be focusing on those questions. And yes, we are going to take breaks. So, all right, be supportive. Let's lift each other up. You guys have been doing a great job of that in the chat. We really appreciate the positive energy, the positive vibe. Be patient. We have 5 nights together. This is night 3. And be kind to one another. We're all in this together. All right, so let's see. And don't forget that you can win $100 by sharing your cram experience. And if you win, you need to tell us. You need to tell us in the chat if you win $100 by sharing your cram experience on social media. All right, so let's get started. Unit 9, globalization. Period 4, 1900 to the present. So this should only take really about 25 to 30 minutes to get through. Unit 9 is called globalization because it really is about the new interconnectedness brought about by technology. The world has become flat. Everybody can communicate across distances. So the first question is about what are the consequences? Oh, let me go ahead and make sure to turn on the captions. My apologies. Let's see. Caption preferences, toggle captions. All right. That's interesting. It is frozen. I'm freezing. It's lagging. It's back. Okay. So you may need to refresh or reload in order to make sure that you're getting the information. The consequences of new technologies in the 20th century for social interactions and economic exchange. That's the first question in the packet. This one's pretty intuitive. I don't think that I need to introduce you guys to cell phones and internet technology or social media. You guys use it all the time. But it is important to be able to explain it. Don't assume that your reader can make the connection. You do want to say that because of social media, people in one place can communicate with people in another place. There's the communication across distance that is instantaneous, like what we are experiencing now. The other thing is economic, in terms of economic exchange. Instead of going out to buy a book, for example, at the bookstore, back when people used to read, now you can just go to on Amazon and you can order a book and it could be delivered within hours. So all of this means that people are interacting more, both economically and socially, in a very short amount of time. This means that also this has implications for transportation in terms of like the movement of people. It is much easier as well. So the first lesson of Unit 9 is about how new technology aids increased interaction across distances, which you are currently experiencing. The second thing, which is perhaps intuitive, but maybe a bit surprising to some of you, is that it used to be the case that people were not able to control the size of their families as much as they are now. But even though there was some certain kinds of birth control in the past, now you have the birth control pill, which has an effectiveness that is really a game changer. And the impact of the birth control is something we're going to talk about, when it comes to social change, is a sexual revolution, which really just means that women can delay childbirth. And so because their decisions aren't necessarily based on when they can, it just empowers them to be able to choose when they have children. So what that basically means is that the number of children decline, and because of delayed childbirth, families become smaller. That is a demographic change that's brought about during this time period in Unit 9, which is just the 20th century. We're in 1900 to the present. The other thing is the Green Revolution is going to result in population change. The Green Revolution is innovation in science in which a new strand of wheat is made to be disease resistant. So they genetically modify the crops in order to make them resistant to diseases that in the past would have meant that the harvest failed. So now, beginning in the 1950s and 1960s, in places like India and Mexico, fewer people starve because you have the growth of wheat. So the Green Revolution is going to lead to an increase in population. I would say that in terms of depth of knowledge, Unit 9 is not one that you really need to be able to go too deep into, but you need to have an understanding of the general trends and then write down one example and how that example impacts how people live. So for example, a technology that impacts how people communicate, a technology that impacts how quickly people move, a technology that impacts how people shop and their accessibility to different kinds of markets, a technology that impacts family size, and now a technology that impacts like food and food growth and the ability to eat. So the theme then is just not just know the technology, but just be able to describe like one impact. All right, so another theme other than technology is disease. These are 4 different things we're going to talk about. Vaccines, the persistence of diseases of poverty, an increase in diseases related to lifestyle, and continued epidemics. So first, for vaccines, give an example. Probably the biggest example is polio. This improves health outcomes. There's a lot of different vaccines that you could mention, vaccines that are developed, so many vaccines that are developed that really have an impact on health and expand life expectancy. And then also they allow for just fewer negative outcomes in terms of health. So improved health outcomes is one of the things that happens in that's covered in Unit 9. The other one, though, is that in underdeveloped countries, in countries where there is poverty, where there's not as much infrastructure, where there's not clean water, sanitation, and access to hospitals and regular medical care, you still have the persistence of diseases that should have been eradicated. So in countries where they do have things like sanitation and infrastructure and a functioning government, you don't have diseases like cholera. And there are medicines for malaria. So there's the persistence of diseases that are really just focused, localized on places that are poor. And cholera and malaria are two examples of those. So just know a couple of diseases that are an example of places, like they're diseases that only still exist in places that are poor. And then there's two other types of diseases that in Unit 9. One of them is an increase in diseases related to lifestyle. So the good news is people live longer and they have more food. The bad news is there are special diseases when people live longer and have more food. And that is an increase in diseases related to lifestyle, including diabetes, like in particular, not all diabetes is related to lifestyle, but there are certain types of diets, and there is a connection between lifestyle and type 2 diabetes, for example, or at least even if there's a genetic predisposition, that there's certain lifestyle changes that contribute to diabetes. And then the other one, diseases of longevity, are like dementia and Alzheimer's. So you do have an increase in diseases related to the fact that people actually live longer and have more food. The other one, in terms of epidemics, are diseases of contagion. So actually, it makes sense that more epidemics would happen as population grows and as people become more connected. The more that people interact, the more the disease spreads. You have a disease in China, within a couple of days, it's going to be all over the world because of mobility, because of the degree to which everybody is moving around, interacting in a globalized world. So these epidemics actually not only continue, it's been part of something, ever since, of course, like period 1, 1200 to 1450, the big disease then was the Black Death in terms of an epidemic. But here you have Ebola, COVID-19. I mean, write about COVID. Write about COVID in your essays. If you get a question about disease, write about it as an epidemic, one that is really possible because of how globalized and connected our world is. And then you can see, reports of everything that's happening all over the world because of social media. So the impact of disease socially, one, you do have increased demands on healthcare. This is question number 5. We're going to come back to the major environmental shifts, but so you have the lasting impact. One of the impacts is that healthcare systems can often become strained, especially during epidemics. And then community norms can change. An example of that would be an increase in the prevalence of online education, Zoom meetings, working from home, and of course, masking. So people change their behavior socially because of the impact of disease. All right, so the next theme is the environment. And for this particular question, an important thing about environmental change is that it's connected to economics. So the more countries that industrialize, the more energy that is used. Energy consumption skyrockets as industrialization spreads. So you have an increased reliance on fossil fuels. If you remember back to 1750 to 1900, the industrialization unit, there was this term fossil fuel revolution, in which coal and petroleum and now natural gas are going to be used as sources of energy to fuel the machines. So industrialization relies on energy consumption. The consequence of that is going to be a change in climate. And as you have an increased pressure on the land, increase in use of fossil fuels, you also have a corresponding increase in climate changes. All right, so the next part is about population. These are charts that you may see if you've taken AP Human Geo. Let me just see, who in the chat has taken AP Human Geo? If you have taken AP Human Geo, you probably have seen a lot of these population charts before. It's really, so these population charts are very interesting because they are so varied. So the first one I always like to put up is the United States. It's like a really good reference point for students, but you can see that there are populations that are all the way up to like 100 plus. You can't really totally see the colors there, but that is, you know, there is a significant older population in the United States. China is very interesting because they have, and we're going to talk about that, the one-child policy. And the one-child policy means that at the bottom, they have a much lower, like the ratio of young to old is skewed. So that's one way in which population changes because of a consequence of the one-child policy, which we'll talk about in just a second. And then you have Nigeria. I think something like 60% of the population of Nigeria is under 25. So Nigeria has there's two reasons for that. One, they have a life expectancy of 54. So what you'll notice is that as you go up the pyramid, there's much fewer people over 65. So that's one reason is life expectancy is lower in Nigeria than in the United States, and their fertility rate is higher. There are 5.3 births per family, per woman in Nigeria. So they have a higher birth rate and a lower life expectancy, which creates the situation in which they have an incredibly young population. There was an SAQ a couple of years ago that gave a chart, which was basically an AP Human Geo chart, talking about the impact of disease on population, but then also about like, what does that mean socially? If your population is a lot older, what does that mean, right? Probably strain on social services. As they retire, the people who are working, who are like paying into some sort of security system or social security, that's going to create some problems, right? How are all these young people going to take care of older people as they retire? But conversely, if you have a really young population, what does that do to a society, right? If you don't have an older population to help out and take care of the younger population, what does that mean socially? So one thing I want to point out is like, what does this have to do with government policy? Because it's true that all these things are shaped by and influence what governments do. If you're going to know one example of demographic change, you should know China. So here it says contrast two countries' policies in the packet to the overall higher birth rate and lower death rate occurring at the same time. I think China and India are two really good examples. They have really high, really large populations. In terms of China, they had a much more direct state-sponsored approach to demographic change, or to their population growth. And that was the one China policy. If you look at this right here, it says birth rate in China per 1,000, and it's a huge spike in the 1950s and 1960s in under Mao's China. But then they implemented in 1980, you'll see the one-child policy, which decreased the birth rate. And the way they implemented this one-child policy is, well, how do you stop people from having children? Part of it is economic sanctions. They were taxed. Part of it was through education. Part of it was through handing out contraceptives, and sometimes forced abortions and forced sterilization. The consequence, if you're only allowed one child, is in a society in which usually inheritance is through the male line, the family name is passed down through the male line, then males are favored. So that means that sometimes people would have an abortion if it was going to be female, if the baby was going to be female, and or they would abandon the child. And the result is a huge gender skew, like a sex ratio skew. You can see that it's like a lot better than it used to be. In 2004, if you look at that chart, that the male to female ratio is really skewed. And it's gotten a lot better. So that's projected by 2030 to be a little bit closer, but still skewed in favor of the male population. So China is a really interesting case in which population control resulted in this a sex ratio skew. India had a little bit different approach, except for like there's this 1-2 year period in the 1970s of like forced sterilizations. For the most part, their population measures have been slow and steady in the sense of they currently, I think just 2 years ago, reached replacement level birth rate. So now India has a replacement level birth rate. China actually has below replacement level birth rate. Both are not growing populations anymore, actually. They're really populous countries, but one had a very like forcible top-down policy, and India had a policy that was much more focused on education and just trying to persuade people to have fewer children. All right, so that is the population policy. And the next theme is economics. So economic intergovernmental organizations are different countries agreeing to join into an organization to cooperate economically for the purpose of making money, for the purpose of growing trade, growing the economy. So how do you do that? One economic intergovernmental organization to know in the 20th century is the International Monetary Fund, called the IMF, and the World Bank. The purpose of the IMF and the World Bank, it was established in 1944 in Bretton Woods, Connecticut. There was a meeting, and at the meeting, the countries agreed, like the United States and Great Britain, the Allied countries, that if you were going to prevent fascism and communism in the context of World War II, coming out of the global depression, when all these extremist movements had taken over these countries, that the way to prevent that from happening again was through promoting economic growth and post-war prosperity. So the IMF and the World Bank are created to try to rebuild the global economy, to grow the global economy, hoping that if you keep people fed, then they won't become fascist or communist, right? So it's going to be part of this larger trend to support a global economy. However, it ends up promoting certain countries' interests over others, which is going to create a backlash because of, the global economy grows, but it doesn't grow equally for everyone. So it grows really fast for certain people who control the International Monetary Fund, who have a lot of representatives within the International Monetary Fund as an organization, like the United States. And other countries are sort of then economically dependent upon the International Monetary Fund for loans. So the International Monetary Fund, it's established after World War II. It represents a bunch of different governments, but is really mainly staffed by people from, like the United States, I think, has the largest number of people who are, inside the International Monetary Fund, inside the working government of the International Monetary Fund, the working organization, the board. And it gives loans to developing countries. But some of the terms of the loans are decrease trade barriers, encourage markets, cut social services. So these are loans with strings attached to encourage economic globalization. And that is, one, the purpose of the IMF: encourage economic globalization, markets, let the markets grow, let the markets thrive, remove trade barriers, make everything like, one big market, and the markets will solve everything, lift everybody out of poverty, and let capitalism reign. And then the critique of that is that capitalism doesn't benefit everybody equally, and this new global system is really skewed in favor of a few and leaves the developing world dependent. So one of your thinkers in Unit 8, the Cold War, one of the non-aligned movement that we talked about last night, was Kwame Nkrumah, who was this leader in Ghana. You don't necessarily need to know his name, but it would be cool if you did. Kwame Nkrumah wrote something called, I think he said, Neocolonialism, the highest point of imperialism. And he argues that the International Monetary Fund leaves African states economically dependent upon not just the IMF, but upon like the United States and France and Great Britain, their former colonizers. So he refers to this as neocolonialism. All right, so that's an example of a new economic intergovernmental organization, the IMF and the World Bank. They support free trade and globalization, and some people love it and some people protest it, which we'll talk about. An example of number 8 question, a regional trade organization is NAFTA. Another example is ASEAN. You can see here on your packet. There's a lot of different regional trade organizations. NAFTA is the one that is most familiar to students who live in North America. This is the North America Free Trade Agreement. It's actually not an association. It's a treaty which decreases trade barriers between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. It was actually renegotiated. So this was signed in the early 1990s. It was first negotiated by George H.W. Bush and then signed by Clinton and President Bill Clinton from the 1990s. So you'll have to know about next year, I guess, if you take a push. And then it was recently renegotiated by President Trump as the USMCA, the United States, Mexico, Canada Agreement. And there's a really great video which talks about the difference between NAFTA and the USMCA if you're interested, but that's kind of getting into the weeds. The point is free trade, let the markets thrive, remove trade barriers. And the idea is that as a region, in terms of the global economy, if the United States, Mexico, and Canada agree that like Mexico will make one particular good and the United States will have access to those parts and make another good, that would result in economic growth and cheaper goods and allow the region as a whole to be more competitive in the global economy. Okay, and then the last part, question number 9 here, so we have 7, 8, 9 for economic intergovernmental organizations, is about industry. It says here BRICS, and I think, do I have, yeah, I have another slide that talks a little bit more about this, but it basically means like, how does the economy change in the 20th century and the latter half of the 20th century in particular? And we are back to things made in China. You know, we started off in Unit 1 with a lot of things made in China. The pivot of the global economy in terms of manufacturing was in the Indian Ocean. In India and China, there was that saying like India clothed the world. And here we are, you know, then we circled back into the first industrial revolution, and then you have the spinning jenny and machines making everything in like Western Europe, and then the shifts into like the United States and Japan, which, you know, are industrializing. And now we've come full circle, and the global share of manufacturing of goods happens in these countries, which experience like huge economic growth. Manufacturing and the industrialization in the second half of the 20th century of these BRICS countries, as they're called, really, you know, results in like just skyrocketing economic growth, double digits sometimes. So this is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Those are the BRICS countries. After 1950, you can think about like, actually, I could think 1960s, 1970s, and then really takes off. In the 1980s, you have economic prosperity or economic growth, rapid economic growth. And in some ways that creates a lot of benefits, like literally lifts people out of poverty. And in other ways, it also, you know, that growth doesn't happen equally. It creates inequalities. It creates rapid urbanization. And so there's pressures on cities to keep up with the urbanization and all other kinds of issues. But these are the BRICS countries. So if you're asked about economic change as it relates to regional shifts globally, you could talk about the economic development of manufacturing centers shifting to the BRICS countries. Meanwhile, what is the United States doing? They have Elon Musk. So, you know, that is, actually, it's not just Elon Musk. Even before Elon Musk, there was tech stuff going on. And this is the knowledge economy in the information age in the United States. You know, you have Silicon Valley, and not just Silicon Valley, but there is like a whole industries related to the new technologies of the information age. And the United States plays a big role in that. All right, so the next part of it, the last part of it really, is about political reform movements and responses to globalization. We talked about technologies, we talked about the environment, we talked about economics, and now we're going to talk about rights. The APUSH exam and the AP Euro exam did have several questions about rights. Rights, of course, coming out of, if you get a rights question, you should always talk about the Enlightenment. And but here from the expansion of rights-based discourses from the original, like John Locke, Life, Liberty, and Property, we now have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Rights applied to individuals it's adopted by the United Nations. And it reflects this value and this principle that across the globe, individuals should have human rights. And that continues to be something that is put at the front of social movements. And in particular, this question is, if you're going to talk about one social movement that achieved significant change after 1990, because Unit 9, a lot of times these trends will be like all the 20th century, but if you're going to talk specifically about, you might get a question after 1990, if there is a movement, I would mention this man, Nelson Mandela, and the end of apartheid in 1994 in South Africa. So in South Africa, technically, they were free after like the Union of South Africa in 1910. But most South Africans were not free if they were not white. This system of racial segregation was reinforced legally in 1948 officially, and it doesn't fall into the 1990s. Finally, in the 1990s, because of the because of the efforts of Nelson Mandela, who used nonviolence as part of his strategy, then apartheid ends and Nelson Mandela becomes the first Black South African president. A new South Africa that represents all people, because Black South Africans could not vote, non-whites could not vote before the end of apartheid. There were all sorts of ways in which they could not, they were restricted. And if you guys have read Born a Crime by Trevor Noah, then you know a little bit more details about kind of what it was like to grow up in apartheid South Africa. It's a really interesting book. So, however, rights are still being promoted, and an important part of social movements continuing to push for their expansion. So the struggle continues. Protest movements continue. There's a picture up here of an example of the climate justice movement. And of course, you can probably think of a lot of different movements as people push for elevating the human experience, expanding this idea of rights. So globalized culture, examples of globalized culture, just these last few questions in the packet for Unit 9, and then we'll take a break and then move on to a quiz, a Unit 9 quiz. You guys live in a globalized culture. What's your favorite thing that's not of your culture? I don't know. There's so many things. There's Bollywood and anime and K-dramas. I hear K-dramas are very popular. All sorts of music and things that are produced in one region that become popular all over the world that people consume. This is the era in which you guys live. So globalized culture. There is backlash. There's backlash to globalization. There's economic backlash, protests, people who think that the IMF should not be in charge. There was a group in 2011 who protested for about 60 days, starting in New York, and it spread all over. They were called Occupy Wall Street. So that's one example. There's religious backlash, people who reject the idea of a Western-dominated or even secular nation-state model of global politics. And so they try to bring back old models. That's the caliphate with ISIS. There's nativist backlash, which just basically means xenophobia, shut down the borders, keep immigrants out. So that's also a backlash against the free movement of people and the ways in which the world, the movement of people, the world is connected. And Brexit. So that happens. Brexit is the British exit from the European Union. And that happens in 2016. The European Union was the perfect example of integration. You have something 27 different European countries that join together. Together, they represent 6% of the population. There are almost 500 million people in the European Union with all these different countries combined. And they're we're going to cooperate. And then the UK says no. So they cooperated for a while. And then they decide they're going to exit. They don't want the free movement of people. They particularly don't want people from Eastern Europe. they want to negotiate their own trade deals, and it's like the UK first, England first. And so they decide to exit from the European Union. So the European Union is a great example of integration. It happens after World War II, starting with an economic agreement, the European Economic Community in the 50s. It's formalized in the 1990s, the European Union. And then the British back out in 2016. So that's an example of the trend of integration and backlash. The European Union and Brexit. All right, well, given that, I think that wraps up Unit 9, and we can move into a quiz. Hopefully you guys are familiar with the United Nations, and you should all do the Model United Nations. It's like the best organization. So much fun. So, all right. Let's see, Unit 9 quiz, is that Deb? Do we have Deb back? Is that what it is, or?
Hey. Are you sharing the screen or? Fabulous. Hey everyone. I'm so glad to see you back tonight. We have another great quiz plan. And I really like the responses so far. Everyone, let's get it going. Everyone come on in. Guys. You can join by clicking the link. You know what? I'm gonna post it really quick. Well, this one's the Unit 8 quiz, by the way. Okay, this is a little bit of review. Here's the link, you guys. Someone else had it. Thanks, guys. Fabulous. All right. Are we ready to get started? Okay. Question 1. I'll accept which of the following accompanied the triumph of communists in both China and Russia? Was it a dramatic rise in dependence on foreign aid, programs to encourage industrialization, hostility from other nations, or improvement in women's rights? Okay. Adding in your responses, you guys. Just to note, the packet that you might be filling out with following along is on the bottom. There is no need to respond to everything, just as long as you get the gist and are focusing. It's really just a guide to make sure that you're with us and staying focused. And a lot of you guys have been focusing, especially tonight. We're so proud. All right, it looks like a bunch of you answered. Let's see. Okay. So this one was a dramatic rise in dependence on foreign aid. Was the exception. So this question was one where you have to read it carefully. It says all except which. So this one, hostility helped it. Programs to encourage industrialization raised it, and so did women's rights. So dramatic rise in dependence didn't, which makes a little bit of sense. All right, let's see the next question. Okay, what was the Berlin Conference? Was it a meeting between countries to end World War II? Was it a meeting between African countries to split the continent amongst themselves? A meeting between European countries to discuss how to help Berlin, Germany? Or a meeting with European countries to decide how they would split Africa amongst each other to make them into colonies? My biggest tip for the multiple choice questions is to make sure that you're reading it carefully. Make sure that you're reading each question, looking at all the answer choices, and not just seeing one and clicking it, and making sure that the question makes sense. Oh my gosh, great job, you guys. It was D, a meeting with European countries to decide how they would split Africa amongst each other. That's kind of self-explanatory. All right, let's see next question. Which two countries were the primary targets of the Truman Doctrine? Was it Greece and Turkey, Germany and France, Italy and Spain, or China and Japan? All right, thank you guys are answering. I have faith that this one's going to be a good one. If not, that's okay. You'll just know it for next time. Okie dokes. All right. Let's see. Okay, so I remember this one because my teacher taught us to remember it by greasy turkey. That the Truman Doctrine, Truman liked greasy turkey. Okay, let's see the next question. What was the Iron Curtain? Was it a line that divided the United States in half? A line of dominoes that referred to countries threatened by the domino theory? A line that divided the world in half along the equator? Or an invisible line that divided East and Western Europe, the east side being controlled by the Soviets? Okay, the music's back. Okay. Keep putting in your answers, you guys. Amazing! Yep. Eastern and Western Europe. Great job, you guys. Oh, so here we got a quote. So take your time to read this quote, okay? It reads, from Stalin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. Behind that line lie all the capitals of the ancient states of Central and Eastern Europe: Warsaw, Berlin, Prague, Vienna, Budapest, Belgrade, Budapest, and Sofia. All these famous cities and the populations around them lie in what I might call the Soviet sphere, and are all one subject, in one form or another, not only to Soviet influence, but to very high, and in some cases increasing, measure of control from Moscow. This above quotation shows that Winston Churchill, A, was worried about the fact that Soviets had expanded their influence, B, believes that democratic nations of Western Europe should celebrate their success at stopping further Soviet expansion, C, applauded the fact that Soviets were helping the nations of Eastern Europe by improving their standard of living, or D, was concerned that the policy of appeasement was no longer an acceptable strategy. And let's see that answer. Good job, you guys! 82%. Amazing. And he was worried. Okay, number 6. Which of the following movements has developed within states of Africa, Asia, and Latin America and advocated for communism or socialism? Was it A, they sought to maintain the status quo and prevent any changes among the existing social and economic structures? B, they sought to promote capitalism and private ownership of land and resources? C, establish authoritarian regimes and suppress individual freedoms of rights? Or D, to redistribute lands and resources to address inequalities and promote collective ownership? All right, get those answers in, you guys. Those answers in. You're doing great. All right, let's see that answer. Nice. Okay. So this one, they advocated for communism by redistributing land to address inequalities. So remember, the key point of communism and sort of socialism is that they wanted everybody to be equal. Everyone is equal. Socialism, same thing, just a little bit less aggressive about it. All right, let's see that next question. What was the name of Communist China's disastrous attempt to accelerate economic development in 1958? Great Leap Forward, 5-Year Plan, New Economic Policy, or Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution? All right, you guys got this one. Put in your best answer because we're going to reveal the answer now. Let's see. Let's see that answer. guys. That was Mao Zedong's plan, the Great Leap Forward. The set of laws designed to control Black people in South Africa are known as independent assortment, jihad, apartheid, or Quebecois. See? Get those answers in. Yeah. I see in the chat we're discussing the last question. I think also there's some good opinions. The Great Leap Forward industrialized a bunch. Okay, let's reveal that answer. Great job, you guys. This was apartheid, which we just discussed on today's. This overlaps Unit 9. Okay, why was NATO created? Was it to promote fair trade among member countries, to counter the rise of China as a global superpower, to provide collective defense against the threat posed by the Soviet Union, or to establish a global military economy? Empire, my bad. All right, let's get those answers in, you guys. So glad that you're sticking with us. We are almost an hour done with this. Good job, you guys. Very proud. All right, let's see this answer. Nice job! To provide collectible defense against the threat posed by the Soviet Union. Which term refers to the attempt by newly independent nations during the Cold War to avoid the dangers associated with being caught in the middle of a struggle for influence by the two superpowers? Was it containment, partition, non-alignment, or decolonization? Just a call out from the last question, NATO and NAFTA are not the same thing. All right, keep getting those answers in, guys. And that was 9 alignment, and 83% of you got it. Nice job. All right, let's see that next question. Which thought leader is most known for popularizing communism? So this, remember, is where everyone is equal. Was it Karl Marx, President Truman, Joseph Stalin, or John Locke? You guys should have a good idea of who all these people are. If not, don't worry, you still have time. You can read up. People are definitely a good topic to know, but you don't need to know supremely in depth on everybody. And that was Karl Marx. Yep, Joseph Stalin was one of the leaders within it, but Karl Marx was really the person who developed communism. He wrote a book called The Communist Manifesto, and it was his ideas that were taken into making it a broad system. All right, I think we're ready for the next question. Which event led to presumably hundreds of thousands to millions of deaths as a result of pro-democracy protests against the government? Was it anti-Holocaust rallies, Green Revolution rebellions, 9/11 memorial services, or Tiananmen Square protests? Stop, guys. Keep getting those answers in. Thank you. Nice! That was a great percent of you. And the Tiananmen Square protests were in China against communism. Okay. Which two countries filled the power vacuum left by Western Europe after World War II? United Kingdom and France, United States and USSR, China and Japan, and India and Brazil. Also, just want to clarify that the USSR means the Soviet Union. Amazing job, you guys. Yep, those two countries, US and USSR, filled the vacuum by having that Cold War, which brought attention. All right, British policy was Nelson Mandela fighting. You guys know this. You guys know this. Was it anti-imperialism, apartheid, anti-Semitism, or republicanism? Let's see. You guys know this? get those answers in, and let's see. Good job. I'm proud of you all. You guys listened. That was apartheid. All right, our final question. Thank you guys for sticking with us. You're all doing amazing. Decolonization refers to the A, transition of a formal colony into an industrialized one under direct supervision, B, absorption of a former colony, making it a direct state, C, series of conflicts between former colonies due to political differences, or D, withdrawal of state from its former colony, causing its independence. Okay, we got a good amount going. Let's get them in. Let's get them in. Good job. 93% of you. I'm very proud. Thanks for sticking with us. And good.
Whoa. There we go. Hey, good job, Dad. Thank you very much. Thank you for your encouraging words as usual. We appreciate it. All right, we're going to transition now to the DBQ. This is going to be a pretty big, intense transition. So we're going to have to get our snacks and take our breaks as we need. Right? Just let me bring up the slideshow first, just so I could have that ready. And I need to start our captions on that. Bam. Not that I had to caption the word bam, bam, whatever. I think you understand what I'm doing there. Right. Bam. Okay. So listen carefully. A couple thoughts. Lemon Oreos, nothing wrong with that. Okay. They're Oreos, double stuffed, that have a lemon flavor. So earlier I talked about the Nutty Buddy. This is my sponsor. You'll notice that there are some missing. That's me. Last night I talked about these, and I was quite disappointed when people were commenting that they had no idea what a zebra cake is. You'll notice this is brand new. All right. That's because I just finished the other one last night. Let's not forget that. Now, Max liked cosmic brownies. Personally, you could actually teach the GMO. All right. Thank you, Green Revolution, for bringing us cosmic brownie. I don't know what's in them, but there's dioxides, glycerides, yellow 5 lake. Now, this is the one that brought all of this together. I haven't had one yet because they're going to make my teeth chocolatey, but we're going to go with the Swiss roll later on. All right. But for now, those are just things that I have prepared over here. So anytime you see me not on the screen, you can imagine that I'm grubbing it up. But yes, let's get back to work. We're about to do the DBQ. Now, I understand that Heimler is going to go at it tonight. Great. I know there's a Kahoot. I get it. Those people I've been following for years as well. But what I'm going to say, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to have you interact with the DBQ. It won't be easy. I'm not going to lie about that. So if you're watching somebody like you're watching me, you're just like an observer. Good. You're watching. It's easy. You're not thinking. You're staring. You're wondering about their hairline. So go ahead and watch Heimler. Watch him. Now, yes, with the Kahoot, you can do that, multiple guest thing. Have it. Go join it. But what we'll be doing tonight is we'll be giving you a DBQ and walking you through a DBQ. I know that there's some of you that have never done a DBQ from start to finish, and that's why tonight we're going to go pretty slow. For some of you, I think you're going to rock it because your teachers have helped you along. I just also know that there are others that the DBQ is something you might have written maybe once or twice all year, and you may not even know that there's a rubric. So that's why I'm coming in. All right. So let's go ahead and begin. The document-based question is referenced as, yes, the DBQ. It is the bedrock of AP World, AP US, AP Euro. And actually now they're doing document-based questioning on all, even like Gov has it now. So why you need to love the DBQ is that it is 25% of your final grade. It is 4 points every rubric point. Comparatively, 1 point for every multiple choice and 2 points for every SAQ, which means if you're looking at this strategically, it is more powerful to get a thesis statement correct than 3 multiple choice questions correct. So you can get 1, 2, and 3 wrong on the multiple choice, get the thesis, and you actually are going to win the day. Now, when you get your DBQ, it's going to have a DBQ question and 3 LEQs to choose from. You always do the DBQ first because it's worth 25% of your grade. The LEQ is worth 15%. The SAQ and the multiple choice are done earlier. You'll have a brief break. That brief break, we'll talk about that in 2 nights about how much you're going to want to eat in terms of caloric intake. So the directions are going to tell you, your proctor is going to tell you that you have about 60 minutes to write a DBQ and that for 15 minutes you should read. It's all a lie. There is no rules that say 60 minutes and 15. So feel free to read the documents carefully, outline an entire essay, and take 20 minutes. It don't matter. And then if instead of writing for 60 minutes and for the DBQ, you go to 75, that's fine. I like to say that the DBQ is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter what your teacher taught you in terms of content or that you've watched Steve Heimler or didn't even know he existed. If you're looking at the documents, it's the first time other people are looking at them as well. So it's an equalizer that your writing abilities, your thinking abilities will shine through, not your Quizlet mastery. So please take your time. The DBQ is just one question. There are not multiple DBQs to choose from. The actual global average is usually about a 3 or a 3.3 out of 7. That means the global average is below 50%. So if you can get a 4 out of 7, you're above average. And if you get a 5 out of 7, you're awesome. The 6 out of 7 is exceptional. Now think about how crazy that is. You went from a 4 out of 7 to a 5 out of 7, and you went from above average to awesome. So you need to lock in, because you guys have been using that language for the last few nights. You need to lock in. How can you get a 4 and how can you get a 5? I'm hoping by the end of tonight, we have 2 hours. You will be awesome getting that 5 out of 7. Now, in terms of the rubric points, I want to break it down. There is something called the contextualization point, a thesis point, evidence 1 point, evidence 2 point, outside evidence, sourcing, and complexity. You'll notice that complexity kind of stands by itself. 1 year, I graded 1,000 DBQs, 1,000 DBQs. And out of that 1,000, I had 10 perfect with the complexity point. We often nickname it the unicorn point because we don't give them out much. So don't worry about the complexity point, though I'll address it. Worry about those other points. contextualization, thesis, evidence, evidence 1 and 2, outside evidence, and sourcing. This is my easy approach to a format. You're going to want to start with a an intro paragraph that starts off with contextualization and thesis. I tell my students to start their essay with the word before, and I'll teach you that later, and go into a contextualization piece and then a thesis. That one paragraph is worth 2 points, 2 out of 7. Just one paragraph got you 2 out of 7. Then, in a perfect world, you are going to want to write 3 body paragraphs. Now you're watching the smirk. Most students do not write 3 body paragraphs. They usually write 2. So body paragraph 1 is going to want to answer the prompt, have some evidence, and source a document. The same thing for body paragraph 2 and 3. You're going to want to use some documents and outside evidence and sourcing in each one of those body paragraphs. So when you were in maybe middle school, you were taught a 5-paragraph essay. That's kind of what we're doing, just you don't necessarily need a conclusion. And trust me, I've read exceptional essays that only have 2 body paragraphs. So tonight I'm going to give you a prompt. This is going to be the prompt we're going to ride for the next basically 2 hours. The prompt deals with Unit 9, and the prompt deals with the Green Revolution, something we already covered with Unit 9. So let's read the prompt as I have it on the screen. Develop an argument that evaluates the different views of the Green Revolution. So develop an argument is to create an essay that's trying to make a point. It's not trying to summarize, it's trying to make a point, a provable point, typically with a thesis. The word that evaluates, that is a judgment call. That evaluates is like, this was good, this is bad, this is my favorite, this is my least favorite, this is good, this is gooder. Like Top Gun is an exceptional movie. That is an evaluation. It's a judgment call. Different views is people's views being evaluated on the Green Revolution. Now, the Green Revolution, in a simple definition, is a time period where advanced science in the 1900s tried to create methods to make, bad soil, infertile soil, more productive. A very famous version of the Green Revolution would be genetically modified seeds. You take a seed, you learn through science to make it resistant to certain pests, thus it has ingrained pesticides in it. You plant that seed, that GMO, that genetically modified organism, you plant it and you have more produce. You have more food. If you have more food, you could have a thriving society. So I want to make sure you understand that the Green Revolution's goal was to feed all the people. By 1950s and 60s, the world was scared. The world was scared that we were not going to have enough food and that the developing world would rise up in stress and anger, and there could be more global pandemic or revolutions. So the Green Revolution wanted to feed the world, and it was through science that they would do it. So here is a document. This is document 1, and I have 7 of them to do. Anytime you get a document, you are going to want to answer the prompt with it, and you're going to want to try to source it. I'm going to be teaching you, with some help of my students, hipping later. Hipping is when you break down the source, like historical situation, purpose, or point of view. ATP means answer the prompt. I write it down on all of my students' essays. ATP is when you use a document to answer the prompt and not just try to summarize the document. So if the document is develop an argument that evaluates the different views of the Green Revolution, how does this document share a view of somebody on the Green Revolution? So let's zoom on in. You will see that this is Mrs. Dula, wife of a Mexican agricultural official, in a conversation with United Nations official around 1970. If you fly from Tucson, Arizona to Hermosillo, Mexico, what you will be going to see is the type of agriculture that makes you rich. So rich. You will see houses like you've never seen in Mexico City. Swimming pools and everything. They have such a lot of money. The ladies of these rich Mexican farmers like to save, so they form a club. And once a month, they go to Tucson to shop. Some saving. So, how does this document, Mrs. Dula's story, answer the prompt about the different views of the Green Revolution? Answer: some people view that the Green Revolution has helped increase the wealth of some elite in developing nations. That is using the document to answer the prompt. You will notice it is not summarizing the document. In fact, I did not say the word document. Document 1, I didn't say Mrs. Dula. I just jumped right in with an answer to the prompt. If I wanted to jump into the source more specifically, I might want to dive into the backstory of the author and look at the point of view. As the wife of a Mexican agricultural official, Mrs. Dula has seen firsthand the economic development caused by the Green Revolution. This is significant as the new rich are able to shop and enjoy globalized economies. So we have a firsthand account that is going to demonstrate the basically changes coming about because of the Green Revolution. So every time you are annotating a document, either on paper, digitally, in your mind, scrap paper, you want to answer the prompt with the document, and if you can, try to source it. So let's do the next document together. Source is, I don't know how to pronounce this one, I'm sorry. Sabra, I can't even zoom in, it's too small. India's Minister for Food and Agriculture in the 1960s, in his 1970 interview. Farmers in the Punjab, which translates into the area of 5 rivers, it's a very fertile region of mostly Pakistan. Farmers in the Punjab, a state in northwest India, were the pioneers of the Green Revolution technology. If not for them, I am convinced we would have not had made much success of it. They have developed into a very hardy lot of enterprising people. And therefore, when this new technology was offered to them, they took it like fish to water. Everybody competed with one another to demonstrate that he was the best to utilize the new technology. So, answer to the prompt. The prompt is, Develop an argument that evaluates the different views. Some people view that the Green Revolution was a successful event started by the developing world to address their own emerging needs. So you have a problem, you solve it. As the India's Minister for Food and Agriculture, he might be biased and look to oversell the Punjab's influence in the Green Revolution. This is significant as there are regional tensions between India and Pakistan, where both will compete militarily and in the media to assert, missing that T, power. So what I show you here is kind of diving into the author with a point of view, but also using the document to answer the prompt. It is time to do one last example. You'll see that by document 4, we're going to turn you all loose. So this is document 3, and to save all of us from having to listen to me, I'm going to give you a little time to read it. So this is Dr. Vandana Shiva, an Indian physicist, from her article in The Ecologist. That seems like a fun one. And Environmental Affairs magazine in 1991. So go ahead and read document 3, and then I'll come back with the ATP and HIPP. Because of the interest of all your time, yeah, some documents are going to be longer than others, but you are not reading the document to memorize the document. You're only reading the document to answer the prompt. And there could be more than one way to use a document. It is possible to use a document as a complement to the Green Revolution and to use a document as a criticism of the Green Revolution. In fact, that's how you build complexity. An AP reader will find that very nuanced. So some people view that the Green Revolution has damaged the environment, causing more problems than benefits. The purpose of the document was to expose the damage the Green Revolution has done with the hope of changing the approach nations have to feed themselves. This is significant because it notes the long-term effects that will happen to societies. So, do notice the purpose of this document is not to just inform. It's to inform with a goal, with a purpose. So you will see that I purposely infuse the changing the approach nations have to feed themselves. Too often, even some of my best students will write, the purpose of this document is to inform the reader of the problem. Yes, because why? What do we want to happen next? Now, I will admit, you don't have to HIPP every document. you need to answer the prompt. So please breathe in, just breathe in and say to yourself, is there an obvious source and how do I answer the prompt? We've done 3 documents so far. These were led by me. Now it's time for you. This is where you're all going to be asked to engage in the chat respectfully. I have my team of Dr. Posa and our students there to click likes and to give you feedback. So please write what you can and they'll give you some support. So for our next document, it's a shorter one. Let's just answer the prompt. So how does this document, the Human Development Report issued by the government of the state of Punjab in India in 2004, view the Green Revolution? Go ahead and read it and write 1 or 2 sentences total. You don't need to write 3. I'll show the prompt again. Sorry. Develop an argument that evaluates the different views of the Green Revolution. So you're looking to find the view of this author. David Kim, give an example. Point of view is shared there. So some of you have gone to the next level and you're actually trying to source it. I've asked my student team to find something that is particularly really strong, and go ahead and feel free to share that in the backstage and I can post that up on the screen. Some people are asking for the prompt to be just available at all times. Sorry. These are really good. Now, this gives me an opportunity to talk about quoting. As an AP reader, I've been told that when I get to a quote, I don't need to read the quote. Why? I am grading your thinking and your analysis. Thus, quoting a document is using evidence, but I'm not going to grade the quote itself. So you're welcome to quote maybe 3, 4, or 5 words, because that can be your evidence, but please don't overwhelm yourself with these long quotes. You have a finite amount of minutes. You don't want to take it up writing somebody else's words that the AP reader is going to largely negate. It doesn't help you. And I know that some people that'll be typing their DBQs are going to be really tempted to do that. Nicholas, I'd encourage a lot of you to not ever use the word document in your writing. I'll tell you why. When you use the word document in your writing, you start leaning towards summary. Document 4 says. Document 4 believes. And first of all, document 4 is an inanimate object, so it doesn't say anything. And I worry that you are going to summarize versus analyze. Answering the prompt is thinking. It is not just quoting, and it's not just summarizing. All right, thank you very much. For the next document, sorry, I got to click here. We're going to use Doc 5, and we're going to go to the next level. So for this one, we are going to ATP. Everybody's going to answer. Then we're going to HIPP. Now, we're going to have a whole lesson on hipping later. So this is kind of like a rough draft, and then we dive into each rubric point. It seems counterintuitive, but I want to see what you know and what you don't know, then teach you everything. And you'll be like, oh, this is how I tweak what I thought it said. All right. The HIPP here is powerful. Norman Borlaug, he is a United States agricultural scientist involved in the Green Revolution research. He's a Nobel Peace Prize winner. He is considered the father of the Green Revolution. So I think the point of view, the HIPP here is going to be powerful. But don't HIPP first. Let's answer the prompt. So once again, I'm going to go back. The prompt says, develop an argument that evaluates the different views on the Green Revolution. Ready, set, go. The ATP should be, I have a rule of 2. Try to make everything 2 sentences. Your thesis can be 2. Your contextualization can be 2 or 3. It can be 4, but you just don't necessarily need it. Every time you use a document, use it in 2 sentences. Every time you do a HIPP or a sourcing, do it in 2 sentences. When you do outside evidence, do it in 2 sentences. Obviously, I'm not being 100% literal, but no, 1 sentences, you'll have enough time to write more than that. I like some of the phrasing, broader context. I like some of the phrasing you guys are using. So let's try to do this. I'm not trying to say I did a great job at it. So let's say the opposite. If you ever say there's something positive, what is that positive? Is it an economic positive? Now people have more money. Is it a political positive because now people have more stability? Is it a social positive? Now people have more opportunities for class advancement. So take that SPICE T chart and try to apply it. So instead of saying positive effect, what is the positive? It won't, I'm not asking for 4 more sentences. It's like add a few different words in the words you were using. Now, some of you dove into some of your HIPPs. So now I'm going to ask you to do the HIPP by itself. So maybe you're going to use historical situation, intended audience, purpose, or point of view. So if you've already written it, go catch it, copy it, and paste it. Let's see your HIPP. And in a perfect world, identify which HIPP you did. Reap the benefits of the revolution. Immediate response. Overuse. Yeah, so some of you are realizing you could use documents like this in a multiple ways. Yeah, Borlaug wants to continue down the path. Why? Why would he? Point of view is always about the person, the author, the narrator. Now, I have a friend, he teaches AP Euro. He demands all of his kids do point of view. There is no rule about that. You can do purpose each time. You can do intended audience one time, point of view one other time. We'll dive into the rubric soon. It's a strong group. And by the way, I have noted we still have 386, even though there are other AP things going on. Gina, we're going to have a whole lesson tonight on what HIPP is. And I apologize that you feel left behind by that. HIPP is an acronym: historical situation, intended audience, purpose, and point of view. Don't worry, we'll get you caught up. But now, Gina, you know you need to learn something later on. Some other teachers use the acronym HAPPY, but I've used HIPP since it started. Yeah, Kara, you could do purpose for all of them, but don't say the purpose is to inform. Say the purpose is to inform to do something else. I feel that purpose has kids too often summarizing. It's almost like they think it's the easiest one, but then they do it poorly. If you're a history geek and you actually know everything on Quizlet, then go ahead and do historical situation. My history geeks can crush that one. Not everybody in AP world is a history geek. Some of you are there because you were forced to. Some of you are there because you like thinking. AP is a thinking class. I love Julian. Julian, you could be making up that entire intended audience. Yep. But as long as it's rational, then it's valid. All right. I don't want to take too much time. I want to get to documents 6 and 7 and then have a 5-minute break. You deserve that 5-minute break. Now, during that 5-minute break, you might go get a Swiss roll sponsored by Cosmic Brownies, or you'll use the bathroom. All right, let's go to Doc 6. I know that my team is trying to respond to as many of you as possible, but there's only like 5 of us and 283 of you. So don't think that what you're doing tonight is not being noticed. All right. Document 6. The Guatemalan National Coordinating Committee of Indigenous Peasants, a rural organization in Latin America, official statement. Okay, here it is. Your teacher may never had taught you the word indigenous. Can somebody using the chat of what indigenous means? You could obviously Google it first. What is indigenous? Dramatic pause. Native to an area. Somebody yelled, natives! Okay, slow your roll. All right. We got it. We got the answer. All right, we're good. Now, there is sometimes language on the essay that your teacher didn't teach you, and it's not that they did a bad job, but sometimes there's just like SAT, AP language. So indigenous is native people. So yes, maybe people that were Mayan descendants, for example, people that have been there for a long time, probably of the peasant class. So go ahead and answer the prompt using this document. ATP using Doc 6. Helen. Elizabeth. Beth. Lizzie. So many things you could do with Elizabeth. I was going to name my son Elizabeth. Love that name. I'll tell you a template to write contextualization later, but there is a difference between contextualization and historical situation. I could address that later. Yes, my son. His name's Jack, not Elizabeth. Go. I have kids. Be surprised. Thank you, John. Ginger. Holy cream puffs. I don't have cream puffs, by the way. Praveen's really happy. Praveen, you worked hard for that heart. Do you guys wish I had that music in the background? That's for the quiz. That would liven this up. All right. So at this point, you have written an ATP and you've read others. Some of them were than yours, and some of them were whoa than yours. And that's why we're doing it. I mean, if there's 384 people on the call, we gained somebody. Somebody quit Heimler and came to Dranby. Respect. I think it's really healthy that you're seeing multiple voices. Next, go to HIPP. Give me the intended audience. Give me the purpose, the point of view, or the historical situation, which I think would be very, very hard to do for this. So do I, Charlotte. Yes, Charlotte, absolutely. Don't forget, you really want purpose to explain what the author wants to happen. Now, when you do point of view, I tend to have my students say the following. As a member of the Guatemalan National Coordinating Committee of Indigenous People. So when you start your phrase with as the President of the United States, as an AP World student, anytime you start that sentence with that type of preposition, you are setting yourself up for a very powerful point of view. You won't summarize the document. You'll be summarizing the view of the author. Good job. All right. So we are now going to jump to document 7. Then we'll have our 5-minute break. All right, you're doing a great job. We have an hour and a half left. And by that end of the hour and a half, we have gone through every rubric point and given you an example. And we'll be watching a lot of videos made by Adeline tonight. Promise has some videos there too. I look forward to it. So let's go to document 7. This will be our last document. I know you're getting tired. Your brains are getting a little fried. So document 7, focus. Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, also known as the FAO newsletter from the 1980s. Yes, FAO is part of the UN. And if you ever join Model UN, you might be in its committee. Go ahead and ATP this document, document 7. Mun for life, mun is life. Okay. No. Gonna give you a down emoji. Sorry. We'll talk about complexity later. Now, Gupta, I don't know what you mean by a practical approach. So, when my students or my children would get really frustrated and they would like say something really mean, it's like they're trying to convey a message. So you saying practical approach means you're trying to convey a message, but I don't know what that message is because you're not clear enough. So try to be as specific as possible. You don't have to quote. Now, a lot of you are doing one sentences. That's going to be fine, but I would try in May 11th to write 2. So, because you don't need to rush. I'll explain why you don't need to rush a little bit later. Mallory, exceptional, not good, exceptional. Live, some people like talk about like the author. You can just say that. Focus shows or focus summarizes. I mean, I know for a fact there are a lot of kids that use the word document 7 says. I just try to avoid it. It's also better writing, but I don't think that you don't have to worry about it too much. See how awesome you guys are doing? You don't know that. I mean, I'm the AP guy, but you're doing a great job. And you're actually doing better on document 7 than on document 6, which is better than document 5. So that's called growth. That's why we're here. Keep reading other people's work. We're about to move to HIPP. So you can maybe do the point of view of focus. You could do the purpose of this document. You could do the intended audience. Who is supposed to read that and how does that impact the document? So let's go to HIPP now. Let's leave ATP. Rian Patel, you're right. I would never worry about complexity. Asher Botman, that is some brilliant stuff Asher Botman is saying there. Good job, Ash. So Joshua, I would just say, what do you mean by mixed benefits? If I ever come up to you and you ask me, how is the movie? And I say, meh, you understand what I mean by that. But in an AP world, we can't just say, meh. We have to give the evidence that justifies or explains the meh, even though we all know what you mean. Jane C., I hope you had a nice dinner. I don't know if it was Swiss rolls, but I will say we're going to hit each rubric point later. Lila, the link is, I think people were saying, for me, it's at the bottom of the screen where it says Cram Hub. I think other people saying it's where the schedule is. Emma's because, I mean, look, like, they're not open yet. You can't say I love it. I haven't had one yet today. Ron Jones, no, we're going to do thesis statements later. Sorry, Gina. I was going to read it, but then things kept going up. I'll read it, Gina. So the next question is, Gina, what should then happen? The intended audience of this document is people supporting the Green Revolution. How does that matter? How does that impact the document? What does the author want that particular group to then do? Just a little bit more on that. All right. So we are about to take a deep breath. There is part of me that knows that some of you are unsatisfied because I'm not grading all of this. There's 381 of you. It's just practice doing what you do. So let's say it's May 11th. The DBQ is laid in front of you. For each document, you're going to want to jot down a brief ATP and HIPP, like 2 words, 2 words. Once you've done that to all 7 documents, then, as somebody mentioned, you group them. Now, as Amy knows, there used to be a time where they demanded you to group your documents. You don't have to group them. I taught this one student. All he did is he wrote 7 mini body paragraphs, 7 of them. Document 1, ATP. Document 2, ATP. Document 3, ATP and HIPP. Document 4, ATP and HIPP. It was the worst essay ever. But it got all the rubric points. He got a 5. He was also a French speaker. So that's awesome. I think he wrote in English. But he was a native French speaker. Challenging. So we're going to pick up with the DBQ rubric points one at a time. Harley Ross, ATP means answer to the prompt or answer the prompt. So I'm going to put a pause on this. I'm going to share a different tab. I think I have it up already. There it is. All right, so let me get that bigger. Don't start yet. So I'm hoping right now you're all going to find a little time for yourselves. All right. Because when we come back, you only need 3 hips. Double stuff. If it ain't double stuff, don't bother. Don't even bring it to my house. Okay. Don't come to my house. All right. I'm going to go ahead and start the timer. For 5 minutes, we are going to leave the chat. Even your students and Amy and I are going to leave the chat. We're going to take that 5 seconds of happiness. I'm probably going to go get another cup of coffee, and we'll see you in 5 minutes. All right, so when I was just chilling here trying to make my camera work, I want to let you know that I have a student right now. She just graduated Penn State, all right, Penn State University. I'm from Pennsylvania. She got a 2 on the AP World exam. She just graduated with a 4.0 at college, and she's going to go get her doctorate. The goal here is not to get you 3, 4s, and 5s, is to make you better writers and thinkers. She struggled on the multiple choice. She did. She wrote great essays, but she struggled on multiple choices. So please just try your best. Don't be stressing about that final score, okay? It'll all be good in the end. You'll forget about it weeks later. All right. So yeah, Katie, truth. Speak the truth. Preach it up. I got a cup of coffee. I'm good to go. All right. So just a reminder, these are the DBQ rubric points. I'm about to teach each and every single one, and we will practice them briefly. We've already done a lot of writing, and I know that you're getting emotionally fried. Along the way, we will try to see if we can get another Unit 9 quiz in there as well. So this, again, is the format. Now, I kind of made somebody like when I said you don't have to group. I'm saying you just don't have to group. There is no rubric point that requires grouping. So what we do in College Board is we do something called the asset model. We give you points for things we tell you to do right. We don't take off points when you do something wrong. Meaning, you can write a thesis at the beginning of your essay that is awesome. Then write another thesis at the end of your essay, which is permitted, that is horrible. We don't take off points because you had one bad thesis. We give you a point for one good thesis. So for grouping, I encourage grouping. If you can lump 2 documents, 3 documents under the same answer to the prompt, then I would go with it. You're saving your writing time. If 3 documents answer the prompt in a similar way, then you go with it. All right. Hey, there's that prompt again. First, we're going to talk about contextualization. The screenshot at the top is literally what College Board gives. You need to describe a broader historical context relevant to the prompt. So what is going on a broader scale that is relevant to the prompt? It doesn't answer the prompt, it's relevant. To earn this point, the response must relate to the topic of the prompt in a broader historical events, developments, or processes that occurred during or continue after the time of the question. This needs to be more than a sentence or a phrase. So, it is often found at the beginning of the essay, but it doesn't have to be. I just encourage you to get it done first. Often 2 to 4 sentences work. I have some students that write contextualizations that last an entire page. That is way too much writing for one rubric point. Now, what I'm about to do is give you a little overview from one of my faves. Her name is Adeline. She's in the chat as we speak. Adeline's going to make has made a little mini lesson on contextualization. Hopefully the technology works here.
Hi, I'm Adeline, and today we're going to be talking about contextualization. Contextualization is quite literally giving context about the prompt. This is also giving extra information before, during, or continuing after the prompt that helps set the stage and zoom in on your topic. Contextualization is worth 1/7 of a DBQ and 1/6 of an LEQ, and it works the same for both. It's usually the first few sentences of your introduction paragraph, usually 3 to 4 sentences. Here are 3 helpful hints. Think of context on a TV show or movie. Sometimes they bring in moments from past episodes relating to the one you're about to watch. For example, it might not make much sense if on a TV show, randomly character A went up and slapped character B with no reason. However, if you had the previous knowledge that yesterday character B shoved character A over in the hallway, it might make a little more sense why character A is mad. This is what giving context does. If you're completely stuck, find some room and start a brain dump of everything you know relating to the topic. Some of the information that's not quite right for within your essay might make great contextualization. Most importantly, make sure the context relates to the thesis. For example, don't talk about Constantinople in an essay about European revolutions. Anyways, that's all you need to know about contextualization. Make sure to include it on your DBQ and LEQ, and you're going to do great on your AP World exam.
That is some supportive language. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Adeline, and today we're going to be talking about...
No, I think I shouldn't have made it so big. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What if I hit escape? Yes, I figured it out. So Adeline hit the nail on the head, and she also hit a student in the face. What I really want you guys to understand is that broader context that gives more meaning to the prompt. So let's look at the next page.
Hi, I'm...
Here we go. If I had to tell you one of the things that I love the most, it is literally this next slide. I am now telling you what the first word of your DBQ or LEQ should be. First word. The word should be before or during. Now, I, by far, with all of my students, prefer the before approach. So this is where you say before and infuse the topic, and you talk about what was going on in the time period before the prompt. So an essay about expansion of Islam between 1450 and 1750, think of those years, may make connections to the Mongols and the trade routes beforehand. So it's giving context to the gunpowder empires by talking about the Mongols, the spread of Islam, religious toleration, and gunpowder itself. Now, you are allowed to do the during approach. So an essay that is about changes along the Indian Ocean trade network may also make connections to changes along the Trans-Saharan or Silk Road trade routes. So you could either go before or during. It really depends on where you want to be on that arrow to the right of the screen. So as of right now, I have now told you what the first word is in your essay. You're welcome. You have to write the rest of it yourself. Good luck with that. Now, it's your turn. Develop an argument that evaluates the different views of the Green Revolution. In the space in your chat, write the word before. You can actually write before the Green Revolution and see what comes next. Good luck. I'll be here. Keep going, Praveen. Great start. Sure, Maddox. Emiliano. Respect. Green Revolution's around the 1950s and 60s. So what social, economic, political, agricultural situations were going on? Somebody mentioned it. Sophia, give me evidence. Give me an example. Where was there a growing population explosion? Can ask that my team. Let me know in backstage if there's something I need to know. I actually haven't been paying attention to the backstage enough. Like where you went, Lauren? I'll give you a like emoji. There we go. It's like I don't even know how to do an emoji. Okay, Aiden, love you, but we can't go back 300 years. So remember the directions for contextualization. It has to be like relevant to the prompt. So the Enlightenment is not relevant to the prompt per se. I don't know why people end it. I love the fact that people are bringing up decolonization, because decolonization, not to be like overly excited about this, decolonization has a bunch of emerging nations, developing nations breaking away, being independent, but now having the burden of having to catch up to the industrial West that held their growth. So they couldn't feed themselves. They were too busy picking cotton, digging for diamonds, looking for gold, looking for silver, growing bananas. So because they were working in those types of agriculture, they weren't like self-sufficient. They weren't able to eat. So I'm going to see what somebody might have put at the backstage. Adeline, I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to copy it and paste it. Hopefully we all good. So Adeline dropped this one in. She knows how to write good contextualizations and even make videos about them. So I'm just going to put it right here. Before the Green Revolution, populations were smaller and there was not much as food to feed growing populations. Food was scarce commodity, often decreased by pests and droughts. This led to much difficulty and even the rise of communist ideas. People looked for solutions for hunger. I like how you made a connection to communism. Now, I would love for students to try and think of vocab in their contextualization. It could be a proper noun. Doesn't have to be, but it would be nice. Just a little bit more evidence, name dropping, sprinkle some facts that will help guarantee contextualization. I think a lot of you are getting it. Now, maybe you don't get it because of the prompt. I'm more worried that you don't get what contextualization is. Now, one of my students said earlier tonight, how is contextualization different than historical situation? Contextualization is contextualizing the prompt, the whole prompt. Historical situation is contextualizing the document. So that's what the difference is. They can't count. You can never double dip in the AP World rubric. I love how many people made connections to the Industrial Revolution, World War II, Total War. These are all relative. Population growth, reliance on technologies. Now, I got to also be honest, though. If you're vague, the AP reader will say, that was pretty good, but There is no partial credit. There is no 0.5 credit. So that's where you really need to say to yourself, before you go to thesis, did I write everything that helps make the prompt make sense? You do not need to rush. Good job. Lots of good jobs. What is that? Cece. Man, Cece. Good. Santino. Got locations. I think India is a solid one, by the way. If you really think about the documents you were reading. Decolonization. All right. Let's go to our next. So here is an example. This might be good for you. It's what I have. During the 1960s, the Cold War was occurring between capitalist and communist nations such as the United States and the Soviet Union. Therefore, the United States and its allies were against communist countries and wanted to prevent other nations from turning to communism. One aspect that led to the nation potentially becoming a communist nation was poverty and starvation. This struggle was especially significant because the population, therefore the amount of food required, had drastically increased during this time period following World War II. The Green Revolution was created to solve the food shortage and prevent starvation in those in poverty. This was accomplished through modified seeds, new pesticides, fertilizers, and growing farming techniques. So, slow it down. Let's see what your comments are, because this is where I upset kids. What just happened there? Number one, way too much information. You did not need that. You didn't, but it was there. So like take a marker and take out a couple words and it still works. Now look below that. You will notice I put a definition of the Green Revolution in it because the prompt is about people's feelings about it. So to define the Green Revolution and explain how it came into being is completely a perfect transition to people's feelings about it. So I don't want to tell you what words to take out. You could take out United States and Soviet Union. You could take out the entire sentence called therefore. Just take that whole thing out. You could take out and therefore the amount of food required. Like there's just a lot of little drips and drabs you could take out and that would still count. I'd rather show you a better version than a worser version. I said worser. So that's contextualization. Let's take a deep breath. Gina, good job. I ask my students to do their thesis statements next. Problem. You haven't written the essay. So it is rational that you write your contextualization, skip space, and then write a body paragraph. I kid you not. I don't know what my students are going to do at school. I really don't. But there is no reason to write a bad thesis statement. You could skip space and come back. Your thesis statement, in theory, is an answer to the prompt, setting up how you're going to use your documents. So, here is what the rubric states. It responds to the prompt with a historical defensible thesis that establishes a line of reasoning. To earn this point, you can have more than one sentence. It's not called a thesis sentence. It's called a thesis statement. So often people group their documents and that kind of sets up the thesis. Often people use a historical reasoning process like compare, contrast, cause, and effect. You can write, this is huge because some people don't even know this. you can write your thesis at the beginning of your essay early on, or at the end, at the way end. Okay, so I'm grading. If I see a bad thesis at the beginning of the essay, I will flip through and I will grade the last sentences to see if they did a better job there, which means you have 2 opportunities, early and at the end, to try and do the same rubric point. Can you imagine that? That you get 2 opportunities, and yet many teachers don't tell their students to do that. Please consider writing your thesis twice. So, a line of reasoning is how the author plans on proving such a claim. So, I'm a Star Wars fan. I'm also a Top Gun fan. Develop an argument that evaluates the extent of change caused by the original Star Wars movie trilogy. Thesis: the original Star Wars movie tremendously changed the movie industry, period. That's your claim. The Star Wars movies opened the door to an increasing number of fantasy and sci-fi movies, and were causing movies to also profit from action figures and other children's toys. That is 2 lines of reasoning to the claim that Star Wars tremendously changed the movie industry. Now, you will write a body paragraph on the increasing number of fantasy and sci-fi movies, and another body paragraph on the profit from action figures and other children's toys. So it's time. Let's watch Adeline's video on the thesis statement.
Hi guys, I'm Adeline, and today I'm going to be talking about how to make a thesis. Okay, so a lot of you probably know what a thesis is, but in case you don't, it's the last sentence of your introduction paragraph, and it basically sums up what you're going to be talking about in your essay, whether that's a DBQ or an LEQ, and it also presents your argument to the reader. Writing a thesis can be a little tricky if you don't know how to go about it, but I think that for me, something really useful is to use kind of an although ultimately standpoint. And you don't need to use those exact words, but it can really help you phrase your thesis, especially if you want to have a multi-pronged thesis, which you definitely do if you want to get the complexity point on your DBQ or LEQ. And basically what this means is you're saying, although this happened, ultimately this happened, and it's just kind of summing up what your argument is. And so your 3 body paragraphs might be about 3 different topics. So your first topic would be the although, and then your second 2 would be the 2 ultimately statements. So one example of how you might use an although ultimately thesis standpoint is if you had to write an essay about the justification of Britain imperialism, you might point out some pros of it, and you might also point out some cons. And whichever one is kind of heavier in your mind, you might want to put as the ultimately. So an example of this could be saying, although Britain's imperial actions improved healthcare and infrastructure in the colonies, ultimately they oppressed the colonial people and worsened European tensions. So as you can see from that thesis statement, the 3 points that I pointed out in my thesis are what I'm going to be sculpting my 3 body paragraphs around. So it's helpful to create your thesis before you start writing your body paragraphs, as it can help you kind of format your essay. So for me, if I was using that kind of thesis, my body paragraphs would probably be around the positive actions that that imperialism had on the colonies, and then also further worsened tensions would be one of my body paragraphs, and another body paragraph would be colonial oppression. And it kind of just helps your reader know what you're going to be talking about, and it helps you figure out your own argument after looking at your docs, or if you're writing an LEQ, just using your own prior knowledge. It's important to remember that a thesis is the core of your argument. It's basically the main points that you want to be talking about. So it's important that you put a lot of effort into it and have it really say what you want to say in your essay, so that both you can be organized and your essay can flow well, and your reader will be able to score you well based on your thesis and what you're going to be talking about later in your essay. So I think that's everything about theses. Good luck, and you're going to crush it on your AP exam.
Wow, that was really great. She's a talented student. You can just tell. Wonderful. Adeline brought up the idea of writing with complexity, the although approach. Some of you have learned in your classes about the John Irish approach. I just think you there it is, Ishan. I think it's just okay for you to take your topic sentences and combine them. So, write body paragraph 1 with a topic sentence. Write body paragraph 2 with a topic sentence. Look at your 2 body paragraphs and say, all right, how do I combine those topic sentences? Add them together. There's your thesis. There's no John Irish. There's no formula. It's just 2 topic sentences next to each other or merged into one another. I'm 100% right on this. By the way, I'm 100% right on this. Why? Because every student I teach gets the thesis point for the DBQ and the LEQ. Put on glasses. You have to trust me. The formula approach is fine, but just breathe, write down your topic sentences blended together. That's why I worry that one of my very talented, gifted students, like Arian, he will come out and he'll write his thesis in the first 5 minutes of the essay. And it's like, but what if you write your essay and it diverges or it becomes better? I worry that your essay turns certain corners that your thesis at the beginning didn't address. So again, you could always write your thesis at the end. Again, AP readers are paid $27 an hour. We are paid to read the beginning and the end looking for your thesis statement. It's our obligation. It's our burden. It's our responsibility. Cool? Cool. All right. Let's see what we have next. No more.
Hi guys,
All right. Now it's your turn. It is time to write a thesis statement. Develop an argument that evaluates the different views of the Green Revolution. Earlier, we did 7 documents. I would like you to write a thesis using 2 lines of reasoning. This will take some time. So while you're writing that, because you're going to have to go back in the chat and look over what you wrote earlier, you might even steal other people's ATPs. I don't care. Your thesis statements, you don't want to be an AP reader. It's painful. You're going to want to take your time on this. So I'm going to go ahead and find my music, play it out, and let you work. I'll talk about the chat. What I think. Claims. Three's perfect. But you don't need to be perfect. These are so good. Don't just use words like beneficial or good. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Don't say words like successful. Don't say words like challenges or problems. You got to say what you mean. This is good stuff. Ariana, nice. Joshua, man, that dirty. You good. You good. I would not say caused social and environmental long-term issues because I don't know what you mean by social and environmental long-term issues. So if you mean environmental degradation, damage to soil erosion, then say that. Not that you're not right, you just didn't give a clear enough line of reasoning. And I find that my students write better topic sentences and sometimes don't add them together well in a thesis, which to me makes no sense. It's because too often, I'm going to be mean about English teachers. English teachers require you to submit your thesis statements before you write your essays in English. And to me, that's counterintuitive. You write a thesis, but then you write the essay, and then you revise your thesis to see if they match. All right. So in the interest of time, we need to move on. There were a lot of good things. So go ahead and look through that chat and realize how well you are doing. Be proud of yourselves. So here is a very clean one. While some people believe that the Green Revolution financially saved society and helped to revive people, others felt the Green Revolution was unnatural and unproductive. Now, to me, this is as low as a threshold as possible. Save society is weak, but financially save society kind of helps that. Unnatural is a little ambiguous, so I would wonder what that would mean. But remember, we're not trying to give the best thesis. We're trying to get a thesis that counts. So I would say that this is the lowest bar of a thesis possible. In a DBQ, you're going to want to have 2 lines of reasoning. In an LEQ, it's probably possible to have 1 line of reasoning. It really depends on how successful the students are that year. All right, thank you, everybody. Now we're back to the prompt, and we're going on to evidence 1 and evidence 2. Sorry, we have to move on. Now, I'm going to take a second, and I'm going to take a sip of my coffee. Wow, Lana. Wow, Lana. I want you in my class. That's great stuff. Ready? Evidence 1 is for 1 point. Uses the content of at least 3 documents to address the topic of the prompt. It doesn't mean you're answering the prompt. You're addressing the topic of the prompt with 3 documents. That is as simple as it gets, people. Now, for 2 points, thus evidence 2, you need to support an argument response to the prompt using at least 6 documents. There is a huge difference between 3 documents that address the topic and 6 documents that answer the prompt. Thus, go for the 1 point guaranteed. Please go for using 3 and be proud of yourselves. Obviously, I would like you to do 6, but you just gotta sometimes take a deep breath. So for 1 point, the writer needs to reference relative content. For 2 points, you need to write evidence that supports an argument. To do this, quoting is not necessary, and most teachers I know discourage it. I even know teachers that won't allow it. I allow it. I tell my students to try to limit their quotes to 5 or less words. I encourage all students to do all 7 documents. Why not? Just in case one of their analysis is weak. To cite, I ask my students to write Doc 6 at the end of their usage, just somewhere at the end. Now, you can write the word document 6, by the way. I say Doc 6. You can even write 6. It is not a requirement that you do it, but your AP readers are reading a lot of essays and they would really appreciate you helping them out. Sometimes when I read an essay, I have to go back and look over things. So it's helpful when students cite their docs. So it is now your turn. Well, we kind of already did this, but now that you see where we're going, I would like you to take a little time, find your ATP and repost it or rewrite it. So answer the prompt with any one document. Maybe in a perfect world, build off of your thesis statement you just wrote. You're basically writing an essay tonight with me. So go ahead and write kind of a topic sentence with one document. I hope that made sense. I guess I'm basically asking you to write your ATP again. Yes, it is Elizabeth. You're writing an ATP. Answer to the prompt with any one document. A little bit more detail, Joshua? No, we're not hipping right now. We're going to have a whole lesson on hipping in a second. Thanks, Aiden. What was that name? What was that name? Belinda, good stuff. Sure, Genevieve, you could say that. I mean, these essays you're going to write on May 11th are going to be pretty sloppy, just as long as they hit the rubric points. Nice, Ginger. Who's that guy from Parks and Rec? Andy? What's his name?
He's the stupid one.
The stupid one. I think that's Andy that Ginger has as whatever. Andy? My son's here. He watches Parks and Rec a lot. Chris Pratt. Yeah, yeah. Quality of life. I figured that out. We're all in tune. All right, now what I want to do is reveal the different evidence 1 versus evidence 2. All right, so evidence 1, using a document 1. Mrs. Dula explains the benefits of the agricultural business and how Mexican farmers and their families are able to live in lavish lifestyle through the Green Revolution. The farmers often bought resources and goods in supporting their economy. This student understands the document. That's evidence 1 if they do it 3 times. Evidence 2 is actually answering the prompt. Rural peasants, some descendants of the Maya, felt that the certain seeds were important to the culture of the Maya and the indigenous people. The Green Revolution modified seeds in order to make them grow faster with less resources. Through this process, the seeds lost their unique attributes, becoming sterilized and altered rather than their original naturally grown version. So this is peasants not happy, not like enjoying the changes occurring. That's Doc 6. So we see that evidence 1 is not horrible, but evidence 2 dives deeper. But you still, for evidence 1, need 3 of them. And for evidence 2, you need 6. Harley, I think you've asked this question twice. I don't have a format to answer the prompt. It is as straightforward as the prompt releases itself to be. How is today's weather? Today's weather is good because it is sunny. Please don't overthink your answers to the prompt because they're using the document to answer the prompt 6 different times. So I don't really have a formula for that. Emma, and a lot of you're all asking for feedback. There is only like 6 of us on the call, so it is hard. We still have 323 of you, which is really wonderful. Thanks, Douglas. Katie, not beg. Karthika, I think we're good. Camilla, I would say that right after that sentence, you need to pull in something from the document to support your assertion. So I believe that is an answer to the prompt. That is a great topic sentence, but it then demands some evidence from the document to support. All right. So let's now go to outside evidence. Outside evidence is something that a lot of students do not get. Outside evidence is pulling in information not in the 7 documents provided. You are not necessarily pulling in another document. You're literally pulling out other information that answers the prompt. You need to do this in probably about 2 sentences. I think my history geeks will get outside evidence because they know history. My good writers, they might be wonderful at writing. They just don't recall everything from Kahoots and Quizlets. So here's an example of outside evidence. Outside evidence is evidence that supports the assertion and answers the prompt. However, the outside evidence cannot be evidence from one of the documents provided. For example, this is APUS, by the way. For example, if all the documents are about the road to the American Revolution, but there is no document about the Boston Tea Party, then College Board is assuming that the writer will talk about the Boston Tea Party as outside evidence and the road to the American Revolution. So if there is like 7 documents about responses to imperialism and nothing about the Opium War is there, that's where you talk about opium trade, Opium War, unequal treaties, Taiping Rebellion, Boxer Rebellion. Like College Board will purposely leave out something of quality, hoping that is going to be your outside evidence. It could be anywhere in your essay. So let's give examples. Some people will put it in a body paragraph, like infuse it. That's the hand signal for infusion. Some people will do it as a standalone paragraph. I don't care. It could literally be its own 2-sentence paragraph. It can be. It's not good writing. It just needs to answer the prompt. Let's read it. Now, it does say it needs to be relevant to an argument about the prompt. I tell my students it needs to answer the prompt. I'm trying to raise the bar. The essay is all about the road to revolution in America. So you tell me how old Thomas Paine was when he wrote Common Sense. You're like, oh, that's outside information. I know how old he was. No, that doesn't answer the prompt. No one cares how old he was or how wooden his teeth were. You do not need to reference outside evidence in your thesis. In fact, your thesis could have 2 lines of reasoning, but you have a 3rd body paragraph. Sorry, Vazu. I just Pain. I don't know about his teeth. I just made that up. All right. We're not going to have time to do outside evidence practice, but we do have time for another video.
Hi, I'm Adeline, and today we're going to be talking about outside evidence. Outside evidence is your time in the DBQ to show what you know. You can't use anything from any of the docs, but you can use anything from world history that's relevant to the time period that the prompt is addressing. Additionally, outside evidence is worth 1/7 of your DBQ, and it's only required 1 time. You have to first cite it and then analyze it to support your thesis. Here are 3 helpful hints. Helpful hint number 1. Although it's only required once, you can use it as much as possible to guarantee that you could get the point. Helpful hint number 2. If you're completely stuck, make a counter argument about one of your docs. Just make sure you analyze it to fit your thesis. You can even work with something already there. Most importantly, make sure the context relates to the thesis and is accurate. For example, if all of my documents are regarding religion and my prompt is to what extent did Christianity influence Latin American societies, but none of my documents talk about voodoo, for example, I could use that as my outside evidence to further support my thesis that Christianity helped bring an increase of syncretic religions into Latin American society.
I hope that covered everything you guys were looking for about outside evidence. Don't worry, you're going to crush your AP exam.
Thank you, Adeline. Great job. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I really feel that outside evidence is the big difference between a kid getting a 6 and a 5 or a 5 and a 4. But sometimes you don't know it, so don't try to fake it. Voodoo done, same thing. All right.
Hi.
Now, we don't have time for you to practice outside evidence, but I have an example. Another harmful aspect of the Green Revolution were the effects of the Monsanto Company. The Monsanto Company created and produced several of the pesticides and genetically modified crops that were used in the Green Revolution. However, these products can cause severe environmental damage and health concerns, and several controversies and lawsuits occurred due to these conflicts. These concerns made the Green Revolution seem ineffective because the purpose of the Green Revolution was to improve health and safety of people. The environmental concerns were also a major issue because farming requires a proper and healthy environment. So, outside evidence is something you might want to do once, and if you have time, twice. But you don't stress if you don't know it, because a lot of other people don't know it as well. So I am trying to decrease anxiety when taking your essay, okay? Now, I really need to get to hipping. Hipping is analysis and reasoning here. For at least 3 documents, you need to explain how or why the document's point of view, purpose, historical situation, or audience is relevant to an argument. For this, I break it down like this. You need to use any 3 different documents, and you should use any of the 4 HIPPs. How the time and place of the document impacts the document is historical situation. We used to call it historical contextualization, but that just made people confused. So we call it historical situation. The intended audience of the document impacts the document, how the purpose of the document impacts the document, and how the point of view of the author impacts the document. So there are your 4 HIPPs. I love point of view. Geeks love historical situation. So you'll figure out what you are. So Promise has made an exceptional video about this. So let's go ahead and give her some time.
Hey guys, my name's Promise. This is probably like the 10th time I've done this video, so hopefully this is the one that makes it. Anyways, I'm going to be talking about HIPP statements. Why are they important? In a DBQ, there are 7 possible points you can get. One of them is making sure that you have at least 3 HIPP statements scattered within your DBQ. Now, personally, I recommend trying to go for at least 4, just in case one doesn't get accepted, you have one you can always fall back on, right? Insurance, so to say. But what does the acronym stand for? H stands for historical context. This is when you go on and on about what's going on in that time period. For instance, in this video, I'm going to be referring to this document right here, which is a portion of the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx. If I'm trying to write historical context for this, I would probably refer to the increase in labor unions, or more specifically, the economic situation within the US that encourages such an increase in the first place. Both would work and are completely valid. But what you need to know is that whenever you're trying to do this type of statement, you always have to talk about things that are going on around the document's time period without it being something that's already mentioned within the document. The second one is I, intended audience. Who does Karl Marx want to see the Communist Manifesto? This is something that you, as the writer, will have to generally infer as you read the documents, based on the type of language or words that the author mentions. For instance, in the Communist Manifesto, if Karl Marx mentions things that only the working class would relate to or connect with, then you can assume that the intended audience is the working class within the US. The third one is POV. Why is Karl Marx being Karl Marx impact what's written within the Communist Manifesto? His belief systems, how he personally identified himself within history, impact what he wrote and why he wrote the Communist Manifesto. The last one is purpose. This is when you talk about what Karl Marx wants people to do after reading the Communist Manifesto. The most important thing you need to understand and remember is that it always has to be with an action verb. For instance, if I wanted to write a purpose statement for this document, I would say Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto to justify the existence of the Marxist movement. The action verb here, to justify. That's how you know you're doing it right. But that's not all there is to HIPP statements. Now you have to connect it back towards your claim, because just writing it doesn't add any substance towards your DBQ. That's why you always include "this is significant because." Do not be shy to mention this after every single one of your HIPP statements, because at the end of the day, what the readers and AP will actually be looking for is making sure that you have substance towards your argument. And it's not a laying essay. It's an AP World DBQ. It doesn't matter if it's repetitive. You gotta do what you gotta do to get that point, because at the end of the day, we're trying to get 5s here, right? Anyways, that's all there is towards HIPP statements. It's really not that difficult. If you have any questions, drop it in the comment and I'll be free to answer. Bye!
Yeah, she did a really great job. You can watch that video 5 times and be a better student for it. I think that was wonderful. Now, I will admit, I have graded students HIPP, and sometimes they don't get it all year. And that's just a fact of life. Maybe they don't even try it. But it is how you might get that 5 out of 7. You know, that extra point.
Hey guys, my name's Thomas.
So we're going to not have time to actually practice it, but here is a historical situation and the use of document 4. The Green Revolution was financially productive and necessary and helped people have success. For example, document 4 explains how prior to the Green Revolution, the caste system was used in India. The caste system organized families into levels based off of religion and work, while upper caste had more privileges and opportunities. Lower castes faced discrimination, poverty, and fewer rights. This hierarchy then been placed in the Hindu religion for thousands of years and was an influential part of Indian politics and society. However, the Green Revolution impoverished people could no longer struggle with starvation and instead able to focus on having a better education, housing, and resources. The middle class became more common, and people found more security in the conformity of the nuclear family over the caste system. I'm not going to keep reading. So what this student did is make a connection to the history of India, the history of one of the people involved in the Green Revolution, and explain how that matters. That's intense. That's really intense. Now, I understand you have to do 3 HIPPs. You have to do 3 of these total. Sometimes you're going to try 4. So maybe you don't have the time to write so much. Then just don't. I'm obviously going to show you good examples tonight. In document 5, Dr. Borlaug discusses how the starvation caused as a result of this environmental impact billions of people, resulting suffering and pain and death. However, the Green Revolution had the ability to solve this pain and could provide assistance for people over the decades. The purpose of the speech is to encourage citizens to invest and believe in the Green Revolution. In addition, Dr. Borlaug wants his audience to understand the harm that starvation has caused. Countries with struggle with famine have more deaths, contagious diseases, contaminated water, and other hazards. With the success of the Green Revolution, people will be able to live more productive and healthy lives. Do know that a lot of people blend purpose and intended audience together very, very often. In fact, if you look at College Board's exemplars basically are purpose and intended audience because they tend to be one and the same because you're trying to persuade the reader to do something. Audience, purpose. So you need ATP 6 and HIPP 3 of them. Now, complexity is the unicorn point. That is why you barely get any time of it, and we're not going to even give examples. What you will read the most about complexity is that it needs to be embedded throughout the essay. HIPP every document. Have 3 outside evidence. Have 3 body paragraphs. you'll see on the right-hand side a bunch of more details. College Board rarely releases a 7. So if College Board is acknowledging that 7s are unicorns, like you don't see them in reality, then I'm going to tell you that I wouldn't worry about this rubric point. It's going to make the exceptional student get a higher 4 or 5 than they already were getting. There is nobody that I know, and I've taught for years, that got a 3 on the AP exam because they got complexity. Because a person that's going to get a 3 on the exam, like me, is going to struggle getting complexity. It's not easy. So I wish they would get rid of it. And I can say that because this is 5-able and this is not College Board. So don't stress. If your teacher has taught you a trick, like I tell my students, try to write 3 body paragraphs. That is 3 lines of reasoning. Maybe that'll help you. But if you look at my data, I don't have a lot of success getting my students the complexity point. It's more than 0. It is, but it's not much higher than that. So if you can see this slide, you can Google College Board AP World released exams. College Board AP World released exams. And they actually have FRQs for DBQs, LEQs, and SAQs online. I bet some of your teachers have used these in your classroom and you just didn't know that. I'd really encourage you to read some of these. I teach some virtual students as well. And because of that, they just sometimes have to teach themselves because it's a virtual class. It isn't unhealthy to find a DBQ and just write it and then compare it with what the College Board scored it. Maybe show it to your actual AP teacher. Maybe they'll score it for you if they have time in the next 3 days. Now I'm going to say something that might sound crazy. 5-able has supports. If you have not used 5-able, you are missing the point. 5-able has content, quizzes, online video tutorials, hints about how to address the DBQ. So use the 5-able library for your benefit. Steve Heimler is correct. If you've ever watched Heimler's history, where he goes over Unit 1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, that's great. Good job, Steve. He actually has better videos on how to write a DBQ, on how to write an LEQ. There is no reason to not watch those after tonight's experience. It's only going to make you stronger and hear a different voice tell you a similar thing. He and I, not that we're friends, he and I don't disagree. And it's really nice to have somebody out there in that virtual world know how to write well. And he does a great job teaching his students that. So we don't have time for Q&A. We did finish it, and we finished it with writing thesis statements, contextualizations, reading each other's work. We got so much done. Now, Amy wanted to make sure that we had enough content tonight, so she added a variety of slides here that talk about social, political interaction with the environment. These are slides that she posted that are wonderful for content and outside information. We just don't have time to go through them. They're kind of for you. They're not necessarily something we were going to lecture tonight. So your AP World team tonight was Dr. Posen and I teaching live, but my kids were in the chat. They were giving you feedback. They were talking you up. They were giving you constructive criticism. And of course, we saw some great videos by Adeline and Promise, and I appreciate those videos so much. Tomorrow, we are going to sit on the stimulus-based multiple choice, the SAQ, and the LEQ. It's going to be very similar to tonight in the fact that we're going to teach and practice. Teach and practice. On our last night, the night before the AP exam, we are going to have a grand finale, which is going to be more game-like, if you could understand. A lot less talking at you and more about you doing. So kind of like quizzing, if you will. So I'm really excited for that night. I love tonight. I've been excited about tonight and doing the DBQ for a while. I love the DBQ. And if you can get contextualization, thesis, evidence 2, that is 4 points. 4. So all you need to do is either add hipping or outside evidence, and you get that 5. A 5 out of 7 is exceptional. So before we sign off, I do want to invite Amy. Is there any other words that I might be missing for tonight? She didn't know I was going to invite her back. Did we do okay?
Yes, that was amazing. The chat was really like, there were a lot of great responses. I feel like we made a lot of progress. The student hosts are amazing and really gave a lot of good feedback. So there is a survey at the bottom, AP World Night 3 survey. We would love your feedback. And we really look forward to more practice tomorrow. We're doing LEQs, SAQs, and just some more practice. And we'll also work in some content review as we go through the skills. So, all right.
I look forward to it. Everybody, good job. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.
Great job, guys.
Make sure you do that survey.